The cold darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Far from any star, a sleek alien ship moved silently through the void. The ship looked like nothing humans had ever built. Its hull was smooth and curved, made from materials that seemed to shift color in the starlight. Strange symbols glowed along its sides, and it made no sound as it traveled between the stars. Inside the ship, Commander Vextal stood on the bridge. He was tall and thin, with blue-green skin that looked like it belonged underwater. His 4 eyes moved independently of each other, scanning the displays around him. 2 long tentacles grew from his shoulders, each ending in delicate fingers. That could work the ship's controls with perfect precision. "Sir, we are approaching the target system," said his science officer, Krillinox. She was shorter than the commander, with the same blue-green skin and 4 eyes. Her tentacles were thicker and stronger, better suited for the heavy work of running the ship's science equipment. The target system was nothing special to look at. It had 1 yellow star, much like millions of others in the galaxy. The third planet from the star was covered in water and land, with white clouds swirling around it. To most species, it would be just another world among billions, but this planet was different. It was home to a species that called itself human. What do we know about them? Vextal asked, settling into his command chair. Krillinox touched several controls, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. Images of humans flickered past, men and women of different colors and sizes, all walking on 2 legs, all using tools with their strange 5-fingered hands. "They call themselves humans," Krillinox reported. "They have been sending radio signals into space for about 100 of their years. Most of the signals are simple entertainment broadcasts, communication between their settlements, basic scientific data." "How primitive are they?" Vextal wanted to know. "Very primitive, sir. They have only just begun to leave their home planet. A few small settlements on their moon, some automated probes sent to nearby planets. Their technology is crude. They still use chemical rockets to escape their planet's gravity well. Their computers are simple. Their weapons are basic projectile systems and chemical explosives." Vextal nodded. This was what he had expected. The Zephyrian Empire had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years. They had found hundreds of primitive species just like this one. Most were not worth much attention. They would develop for a few more centuries, and then the Empire would decide if they were useful enough to contact. "Any signs of space military forces?" the commander asked. "Some, sir. They have a few armed vessels patrolling their star system. Nothing that would threaten us, of course. Their weapons could not penetrate our shields, and their ships are too slow to catch us if we needed to leave quickly." "Good, we will observe them for a while, take some detailed scans, and then move on. Standard first contact protocol: watch, but do not interfere." The alien ship moved deeper into the solar system, its advanced engines making no sound and leaving. No trace. The ship's sensors were far more powerful than anything humans had built. They could detect radio signals from the surface of Earth, count the ships in orbit, and even peer inside human vessels to see how they were built. 3 days into their observation, something interesting happened. "Commander," Krillinox called out, "a human vessel is approaching our position. Are they hunting us?" Vextal asked, suddenly concerned. "No, sir. I believe it is a routine patrol. They show no signs of having detected us." The human ship was small compared to the Zephyrian vessel. It looked rough and angular, made from gray metal that had been welded and bolted together. Compared to the smooth curves of the alien ship, it looked like something a child might build from scrap metal. But it moved with purpose, and its sensors was sweeping the area in a regular pattern. "What class of vessel is it?" Vextal asked. "Their records call it a destroyer." "The designation is USS Valiant. It carries approximately 280 humans and appears to be armed with projectile weapons and chemical explosive devices." Vextal almost laughed. "A destroyer that carried fewer than 300 beings and used chemical weapons." His own ship carried a crew of 50 and could destroy entire planets if needed. The human ship was no threat at all. Who commands it? he asked. Krillanox worked her controls, intercepting the human ship's communication signals. A human named Jake Morrison. He holds the rank of captain in their military structure. His second in command is Lisa Parker, and their chief engineer is Ryan Davis. Very well. We will observe them. Perhaps we can learn something useful about how these humans organize their military forces. Inside the USS Valiant, Captain Morrison sat in his command chair, reviewing the day's patrol reports. He was a man of average height with short brown hair and tired eyes. He had been in space for 6 months, and he missed his family back on Earth, but he took his job seriously. The outer solar system was a dangerous place, full of pirates, smugglers, and other threats to human settlements. "Sir," called out Ensign Kevin White from the sensor station, "I'm picking up something odd." Morrison looked up from his reports. "What kind of odd?" "There's a distortion in space about 50,000 kilometers off our starboard side. It could be a ship, but it's not showing up clearly on our sensors. Any response to our identification signals?" "No, sir. Whatever it is, it's not talking to us." Morrison thought for a moment. Space was big, and there were many things that could cause sensor distortions. But his job was to investigate anything unusual in human space. "Lieutenant Parker," he called to his executive officer, "take us to yellow alert. I want all departments ready for anything." "Yes, sir," Parker replied. She was a tall woman with red hair and sharp green eyes. She had been Morrison's second in command for 2 years, and he trusted her completely. Throughout the ship, humans went about their duties with calm efficiency. The weapons teams checked their missiles and cannons. The engineering teams made sure all systems were running properly. The medical team prepared for possible casualties. It was all routine, the kind of drill they had practiced hundreds of times, but the aliens watching them did not know it was routine. To Vextol and his crew, the humans' response looked like the behavior of a species that was always ready for war. "They are preparing for battle," Krillanox observed, watching the human ship's energy readings spike as weapon systems came online. "Against what?" Vextol asked. "They cannot even detect us properly." "Perhaps they are simply cautious, sir. Or perhaps they are naturally aggressive. We should learn more about them." Vextol made a decision that would change everything. "Krillanox, prepare a deep scan of their vessel. I want to know everything about these humans, their technology, their culture, their military capabilities. If we are going to recommend them for contact with the Empire, we need to understand what kind of species they are." "Yes, sir, beginning deep scan now." The scan would take several hours to complete. It would peer into every corner of the human ship, read their computer files, and analyze their equipment. The aliens expected to find the simple technology and peaceful culture of a primitive species. They had no idea what they were about to discover. In the depths of the human ship, the crew continued their work. They did not know they were being watched. They did not know that alien eyes were studying their every move. They simply did their jobs, protecting their people and their territory in the vast darkness of space. The scan began, and the aliens started to learn the truth about humanity. The deep scan began with a soft hum that filled the bridge of the alien ship. Krillanox watched her instruments carefully as invisible beams of energy reached out across space toward the human vessel. The scan would penetrate every part of the human ship, reading its construction, its computers, and even the personal belongings of its crew. "Initial readings coming in now, Commander," Krillanox reported. Her 4 eyes moved independently as she studied the data flowing across her screens. "The hull is constructed from iron-based alloys. Primitive but effective. They use fusion reactors for power, which is actually quite advanced for their technological level." Vextol nodded. "What about their weapon systems?" "Chemical propellant. Projectile weapons, as expected. They call them cannons and missile launchers. The projectiles are simple metal shells filled with chemical explosives. Very basic, but they seem to carry a lot of them." The scan pushed deeper into the human ship. It read the computer systems, the navigation equipment, and the communication arrays. Everything seemed normal for a primitive species. But then the scan reached the ship's data banks, and strange information began to appear on the alien displays. "Commander," Krilonak said, her voice carrying a note of confusion, "I am reading extensive military databases. They have detailed information about something called warfare tactics and strategic planning." "Show me," Vextol commanded. The holographic display in the center of the bridge flickered to life. Images began to appear, images that made both aliens step back in surprise. They saw vast armies of humans marching across battlefields. They saw machines of war that looked far more advanced than anything they had detected on the human ship. They saw explosions that could level entire cities. "These cannot be real," Vextol whispered. "The scan must be malfunctioning," but Krilonox was already checking her instruments. "The scan is working perfectly, sir. These images are from their historical databases. They appear to be records of actual events." The display showed a battle from human history. Thousands of human soldiers charged across a muddy field while metal projectiles flew through the air around them. The humans fell by the hundreds, but more kept coming. They fought with weapons that seemed impossibly primitive, metal blades attached to long sticks, chemical explosives thrown by hand, and simple projectile weapons that had to be loaded by hand after each shot. "Look at this," Krilonox said, pointing to a new image. "They call this the Battle of Gettysburg. According to their records, over 50,000 humans died in just 3 days of fighting." 50,000 in 3 days? Vextol could barely believe. What were they fighting over? The records say they were fighting about the right to keep other humans as slaves. But Commander, that is not the strangest part. Look at this. The display changed to show another battle, this one even more massive. Millions of human soldiers were spread across a landscape that looked like the surface of a dead planet. The ground was torn up by explosions, and the few remaining trees were just broken stumps. In the middle of this wasteland, humans fought each other with weapons that seemed to fire continuously. "The Battle of the Somme?" Krilonox read from the human records. "Over 1 million casualties for an advance of just a few kilometers. They fought for months over a piece of ground no larger than one of our cities." Vextol felt his tentacles trembling. In all his years of studying primitive species, he had never seen anything like this. The Zephyrians had fought wars, of course, but they were small conflicts over resources or territory. Wars that lasted days or weeks, with casualties in the hundreds. These humans seemed to fight wars that lasted years and killed millions. "Keep scanning," he ordered. "I need to understand what kind of species we are dealing with." The scan continued, and more disturbing information began to appear. The humans had records of hundreds of wars fought across thousands of years. They had fought on every type of terrain, in deserts, in frozen wastelands, in jungles, and even underwater. They had fought with every type of weapon imaginable, from simple clubs to devices that could destroy entire cities. "Commander," Krilonox said, her voice shaking, "they have records of weapons that use atomic energy. They actually built bombs that could destroy entire cities, and they used them against their own species." The display showed the mushroom cloud rising over Hiroshima. The aliens watched in horror as the human city disappeared in a flash of light brighter than the sun. The scan revealed that the humans had built thousands of these weapons, each one more powerful than the last. "They have enough atomic weapons to destroy their own planet many times over," Krilonox reported. "But the strange thing is, they have only used them twice in warfare. They built them, but then they stopped using them." "That makes no sense," Vextol said. "If they had such powerful weapons, why would they not use them to win their wars?" "I do not know, sir. But the records show that they made agreements with each other not to use these weapons. They call it arms control." Meanwhile, aboard the USS Valiant, the human crew continued their normal duties. Chief Petty Officer Danny Rodriguez was in the weapons bay, checking the missile systems with his team. He was a short, stocky man with dark hair and hands that were permanently stained with grease from working on machines. "Make sure those guidance systems are calibrated properly," he told his assistant, Petty Officer Amy Chun. If we run into pirates out here, I want our missiles to hit what we aim at. Amy nodded as she worked. She was young, barely 20 years old, but she had already served on 3 different ships. Her parents had both been in the military, and she had grown up around weapons and spacecraft. "Chief," she said, "do you think we will actually see any action on this patrol?" Danny shrugged. "Hard to say. The outer system has been quiet lately, but that could change. Pirates like to attack supply convoys, and there are several scheduled to pass through this sector in the next few days." "Have you ever been in a real battle?" Amy asked. "A few times," Danny replied. "Nothing too serious?" "Some pirate raids, a few smugglers who decided to fight instead of surrender. The important thing is to stay calm and do your job. The weapons will work if you maintain them properly." The aliens listening to this conversation were puzzled. The humans spoke about battle and weapons as if they were normal, everyday things. There was no fear in their voices, no excitement. They talked about fighting and killing as casually as the aliens might discuss the weather. They seemed to consider warfare a normal part of life, Krillinox observed. Even their young ones speak of battle without fear. "Keep scanning," Vextal ordered. "I want to know more about their culture." The scan pushed deeper into the human ship's databases. It found libraries of human literature, and what it discovered there made the aliens even more confused. The humans had written thousands of books about war. They had poems about brave soldiers, songs about famous battles, and stories about heroes who died fighting for their beliefs. "They celebrate warfare," Krillinox said in amazement. "They write songs about it. They build monuments to their warriors. They teach their children about famous battles as if they were great achievements." The display showed human war memorials, massive stone structures covered with the names of dead soldiers. There were thousands of these memorials in every human city and town. The aliens realized that humans did not just fight wars. They remembered them, honored them, and passed the stories down to their children. "Sir," Krillinox said, "I am finding something else disturbing. Their educational systems include mandatory courses about military history. They teach their children about warfare from an early age." "Show me," Vextal commanded. The display showed human children in classrooms, learning about famous battles and military strategies. The children were young, perhaps equivalent to Zephyrian juveniles, but they studied warfare with the same attention they gave to mathematics or science. They prepare their young for war, Vextal realized. "This is not just a military vessel. We are scanning. This is a ship crewed by members of a species that has been preparing for war for thousands of years." The scan was only beginning, but already the aliens were starting to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not primitive. They were not peaceful. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to kill efficiently and effectively, and the worst part was still to come. The deep scan continued to penetrate the human ship's databases, and what it found next made Commander Vextal's blue-green skin turn pale. The scan had accessed the personal files of the human crew, and the aliens were beginning to understand what kind of beings they were dealing with. "Commander," Krillinox said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I am reading the psychological profiles of the human crew. These are not just warriors, they are something else entirely." The display showed the medical files of the ship's crew. Dr. Helen Carter, the ship's doctor, had been studying how combat affected human minds. Her research showed that humans could continue fighting even when badly wounded, driven by emotions that the aliens could not understand. "Look at this," Krillinox pointed to a file on the screen. "They have a concept they call honor. It means they will keep fighting even when they know they will die, just to protect their reputation." Vextal studied the file. "That is illogical. A dead warrior cannot protect anything." "But sir, there is more. They also fight for something called duty. They will sacrifice their lives to complete a mission, even if the mission is no longer important." The scan revealed more disturbing information. The humans had a concept called esprit de corps, which meant they would die for their fellow soldiers. They would throw themselves into impossible situations to save their comrades. They would fight against overwhelming odds because they refused to abandon their friends? This is madness, Vextel said. No rational species would behave this way. But the scan kept revealing more evidence of human irrationality. The ship's library contained thousands of stories about human heroes who had died in battle. These stories were not warnings about the dangers of war. They were celebrations of sacrifice and courage. They teach their children to admire beings who die in battle, Krillinox reported. They have a saying, "It is better to die on your feet than live on your knees." The aliens watched in horror as the scan revealed the training records of the ship's Marine unit. Major Steve Collins led a group of 40 human soldiers whose job was to fight in the most dangerous situations. These Marines trained constantly, preparing for battles that might never come. "Look at their training methods," Krillinox said, bringing up video files from the ship's computer. The display showed Marines practicing combat in zero gravity. They wore bulky spacesuits and carried weapons that looked crude but effective. They practiced fighting in environments that would kill most species instantly, in the vacuum of space, in toxic atmospheres, and in temperatures that would freeze or burn most living things. They trained to fight in environments where they cannot survive without artificial life support, Vextel observed. "What kind of species does that?" "A species that refuses to accept limitations," Krillinox replied. The scan showed more training videos. Marines practicing with weapons, without weapons, and with makeshift weapons created from whatever materials they could find. They learned to fight with knives, clubs, and even their bare hands. They practiced techniques for killing enemies silently, for surviving in hostile environments, and for continuing missions even when cut off from support. "Sir," Krillinox said, "they have a martial art called hand-to-hand combat. They train to kill other beings using only their bodies." A training video showed Sergeant Maria Santos demonstrating combat techniques to younger Marines. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she moved with deadly precision. The video showed her practicing 17 different ways to kill an opponent using only her hands and feet. "This is impossible," Vextel said. "She is tiny. How could she kill anything?" "Human bodies are apparently more dangerous than they appear," Krillinox replied. "Their bones are dense, their muscles are strong, and they can strike with tremendous force. They have pressure points that can cause death if struck properly." The aliens watched as the human sergeant taught her students to break bones, to stop hearts, and to cause unconsciousness with precise strikes. The techniques had been developed over thousands of years, refined through countless battles and passed down from teacher to student. They have weaponized their own bodies, Vextel realized. Every human is a potential weapon. But the scan revealed something even more disturbing. The humans aboard the USS Valiant were not elite soldiers. They were ordinary members of their species. The files showed that most adult humans had some form of military training, either required by their governments or chosen voluntarily. "Look at this," Krillinox said, pointing to a personnel file. "Cook 3rd Class Sam Miller. His primary job is preparing food for the crew, but his file shows he was previously a Marine sniper. He killed 47 enemy soldiers in something called the Martian Uprising." The display showed a picture of Sam Miller in the ship's kitchen. He looked like a harmless middle-aged man, slightly overweight, with graying hair and a friendly smile. But his military record told a different story. He had been trained to kill from great distances, to remain hidden for days without moving, and to make precise shots that could end a life from miles away. "He prepares food now," Vextel said in amazement. "He went from being a killer to being a cook. And apparently he prefers cooking," Krillinox added, reading from the file. "He requested transfer to the kitchen because he wanted a peaceful job." The scan revealed that many of the ship's crew had similar backgrounds. The communications officer had been a combat engineer. The navigation officer had been a tank commander. The medical officer had been a battlefield surgeon. Even the ship's chaplain had been a military policeman. "They all have military backgrounds," Vextel observed. "This entire ship is crewed by former warriors. But, sir, they are not acting like warriors now. They are performing normal duties. Cooking, cleaning, maintaining equipment. They seemed to have put their violent past behind them. This was perhaps the most disturbing discovery of all. The humans were not constantly fighting. They were not savage beasts driven by bloodlust. They were normal people who had learned to be warriors when necessary, and then had returned to peaceful lives when the fighting was over. They can turn their violence on and off, Vextel said. They can be killers when they need to be, and then go back to being cooks and engineers. The scan delved deeper into the ship's cultural database. It found human entertainment, movies, books, games, and music. Much of it was about warfare, but it was presented as heroic adventure rather than horror. Humans seemed to enjoy stories about brave soldiers, clever generals, and daring missions. They find warfare entertaining, Krillinox reported. They create fictional stories about battles for amusement. But these are not real battles, Vextel pointed out. No, sir, but the stories follow patterns based on real warfare. They teach strategy, tactics, and military thinking through entertainment. The aliens realized that human culture was designed to produce warriors. Their entertainment prepared them for battle. Their education taught them military history. Their society honored military service. Even their games simulated combat and conflict. Sir, Krillinox said, I am finding references to something called the military-industrial complex. It appears that their entire economic system is partially based on producing weapons and military equipment. The scan revealed factories that produced nothing but weapons. Companies that existed solely to develop new ways of killing. Research. Institutions that studied how to make warfare more efficient. The humans had built an entire civilization around the concept of organized violence. They have turned warfare into a science, Vextel said. They study it, improve it, and teach it to their children. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. The scan found files about human psychology and behavior in combat situations. Dr. Carter's research showed that humans actually became more effective fighters when they were protecting something they cared about. They fight harder when they are defending their families, Krillinox read from the files. Their performance improves when they believe they are protecting their home planet or their way of life. That is the opposite of logical behavior, Vextel said. Most species become less effective when they are emotional. But humans seem to channel their emotions into combat effectiveness. They use love as a weapon. The scan revealed combat records that prove this theory. Human soldiers who were fighting to protect their families showed incredible courage and determination. They would charge into impossible situations, fight against overwhelming odds, and continue fighting even when severely wounded. They have weaponized their capacity to care about others, Vextel realized. Their love makes them more dangerous, not less. The aliens were beginning to understand that they had discovered something unprecedented in the galaxy. The humans were not just another warrior species. They were something far more complex and dangerous. They were a species that had learned to combine rational military thinking with emotional motivation, creating warriors who were both efficient and unstoppable, and the scan was only half finished. The deep scan pushed further into the core systems of the USS Valiant, and what it found there made both aliens step back from their control panels in shock. The human ship was not just carrying weapons. It was a floating weapons platform designed by a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to destroy things efficiently. Commander, Krillinox said, her voice shaking, their weapon systems are far more complex than we first believed. They have backups for their backups, and their ammunition storage, ... She paused to double-check her readings. They carry enough explosive materials to destroy a small city. But that is not the most disturbing part. They treat this as normal. The scan revealed layer after layer of redundant systems. If the main guns failed, the humans had secondary weapons. If those failed, they had emergency weapons. If all the mounted weapons were destroyed, the crew carried personal weapons. If they ran out of ammunition, they had plans for making more weapons from spare parts. Look at this maintenance log, Krillinox said, bringing up a file on the display. Fire Control Technician First Class Tony Rodriguez was updating the weapon systems log. He was a tall man with calloused hands and oil stains on his uniform. His job was to keep all the ship's weapons working perfectly, and he took pride in his work. All missile tubes cleaned and inspected, he wrote in his report. Guidance systems calibrated. Nuclear warheads tested and ready for deployment if authorized. The aliens stared at the screen in horror. Nuclear warheads, Vextel whispered. They carry atomic weapons on a patrol ship? According to their files, it is standard equipment, Krillinox replied. They call them tactical nuclear weapons. Smaller than the city destroyers we saw earlier, but still powerful enough to destroy our ship easily. The scan revealed that the USS Valiant carried 12 nuclear warheads, each one capable of destroying several city blocks. The humans treated these planet-killing weapons as routine equipment like tools in a workshop. Sir, Tony Rodriguez was saying to his assistant, remember that the Mark 47 torpedoes can punch through 3 meters of hardened steel. But if we run into something really tough, we have authorization to use nuclear warheads? His assistant, a young woman named Beth Clark, nodded as she took notes. When would we use the nuclear option, sir? If we encounter an enemy ship with armor too thick for conventional weapons. Or if we face multiple enemy vessels and need to destroy several targets quickly. The captain makes that decision, but we need to be ready. Beth wrote this down as if he had been explaining how to change a light bulb. There was no fear in her voice, no concern about handling weapons that could kill millions of people. To her, nuclear weapons were just another tool for doing her job. They discussed planetary destruction weapons as if they were discussing lunch. Vextel said in amazement, but the scan revealed something even more terrifying about human weapons technology. The humans had not just built these weapons randomly. They had spent centuries studying the science of destruction, learning how to kill more efficiently with each generation of weapons. Sir, Krillinox said, their weapons development history shows continuous improvement over thousands of years. They started with sharp sticks, moved to metal blades, then to projectile weapons, then to chemical explosives, then to atomic weapons. What comes after atomic weapons? Vextel asked, afraid to hear the answer. According to their research files, they are working on antimatter weapons, quantum disruptors, and something called relativistic kill vehicles. The display showed human scientists working in laboratories, developing new ways to destroy things. They approached the task with the same careful methodology they used for any other scientific problem. They tested their theories, improved their designs, and shared their knowledge with other researchers. They have made a science out of destruction, Vextel realized. They study killing the way other species study medicine or agriculture. The scan revealed research facilities devoted entirely to weapons development. Universities where students could earn degrees in military engineering. Think tanks where brilliant minds worked full-time on new ways to wage war. The humans had created an entire academic discipline around the art of destruction. Look at this, Krillinox said, pointing to a new file. They have something called the Doctrine of Mutually Assured Destruction. The aliens read the file in growing horror. The humans had built enough nuclear weapons to destroy their own planet dozens of times over. But instead of using these weapons, they had created a system where no one could use them without guaranteeing their own destruction. They built weapons capable of ending their own species, Vextel said slowly, and then they decided not to use them. But they still have them, Krillinox pointed out. Thousands of nuclear weapons just waiting. This makes no sense. If they refuse to use their most powerful weapons, why do they keep them? The answer came from the ship's tactical database. The humans kept their most powerful weapons as a deterrent. Other humans would not attack them because they knew the consequences would be terrible for everyone. It was a system based on the threat of mutual extinction. They have weaponized fear itself, Vextel realized. They convinced their enemies not to fight by threatening to destroy everything. But the most disturbing revelation was still to come. As the scan delved deeper into the ship's systems, it became clear that the USS Valiant was not a special warship. It was a routine patrol vessel, crewed by ordinary humans doing a normal job. Commander, Krylonox said. "This is not their most powerful ship. According to their fleet records, this is one of their smaller vessels." The scan found references to human battleships, aircraft carriers, and dreadnoughts. Ships 10 times larger than the USS Valiant, carrying hundreds of times more weapons. The little destroyer they were scanning was like a rowboat compared to the massive warships the humans could build when they needed to. "If this is a small ship," Vextel said, "what do their large ships carry?" The answer terrified them. Human battleships carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Their planet-based weapons could crack continents. Their space-based platforms could redirect asteroids to use as weapons. "They have turned their entire solar system into a weapon," Krylonox reported. "Every moon base, every space station, every asteroid mining facility has defensive weapons. They could destroy an invasion fleet before it reached their home planet." On the USS Valiant, Captain Morrison was reviewing his ship's status reports. He had no idea that alien eyes were watching his every move, studying his ship's capabilities and finding them terrifyingly effective. "Lieutenant Parker," he said to his executive officer, "what is our current weapon status?" "All systems operational, sir," Lisa Parker replied. "We have full ammunition loads for all conventional weapons. Nuclear warheads are armed and ready if needed. Our defensive systems are at full capacity." "Good. I want us ready for anything. Out here, the outer system can be dangerous." To Morrison, this was just routine military preparedness. He had no idea that his casual attitude toward weapons of mass destruction was being interpreted as evidence of a species-wide acceptance of violence. "Sir," Communications Officer Lieutenant Brad Johnson announced, "we are still detecting that sensor distortion." "Should we investigate further?" Morrison thought for a moment. "No, maintain course. If it is a ship, they will identify themselves when they are ready. If it is not a ship, then it is not our problem." The aliens listening to this conversation were amazed by the captain's calm attitude. He knew there might be an unknown vessel nearby, possibly hostile, but he showed no fear or excitement. He simply continued his patrol as if alien contact was a normal part of his job. "They act as if warfare is routine," Vextel observed. "They show no fear of the unknown. Perhaps they have seen so much combat that nothing surprises them anymore." Krylonox suggested. The scan revealed that this might be true. The human crew had service records showing combat experience in dozens of different conflicts. They had fought pirates, rebels, terrorists, and criminal organizations. They had served in every type of environment, from the vacuum of space to the crushing depths of ocean worlds. They are not just warriors, Vextel realized. They are veteran warriors. They have survived multiple battles and learned from each one. But the most terrifying discovery came when the scan revealed the humans' long-term strategic planning. The ship's computer contained files about humanity's expansion into space, their colonization of other worlds, and their preparations for contact with alien species. "Commander," Krylonox said, her voice barely audible, "they have contingency plans for first contact with hostile aliens." The display showed detailed military scenarios. What humans would do if they encountered aggressive alien species. How they would respond to invasion. How they would fight a war across multiple star systems. "They have already planned for war with us," Vextel said in shock. "Not specifically with us, sir. But they have considered the possibility that they might encounter hostile aliens, and they have prepared for that possibility." The plans were comprehensive and terrifying. Humans had studied every possible type of space combat, developed strategies for fighting in zero gravity, and created weapons designed specifically for use against alien technology. They assumed that any first contact might lead to war, Vextel realized. The final phase of the alien scan reached into the deepest files of the human ship, and what it discovered there would haunt Commander Vextel for the rest of his life. The humans aboard the USS Valiant were not special warriors or trained killers. They were normal people, ordinary members of their species. And everything the aliens had discovered about human violence and military capability was simply part of being human. "Commander," Krylonox whispered, I am reading the personal files of the crew. These are not elite soldiers. Most of them are just doing their jobs. The scan had found the personnel records of every human on the ship. Cook Third Class Sam Miller was preparing dinner in the ship's kitchen. He hummed quietly to himself as he chopped vegetables, looking like the most harmless person imaginable. But his service record told a different story. 47 confirmed kills as a sniper, Krellinox read from his file. Expert marksman, served in 3 different combat zones. Specialized in long-range elimination of high-value targets. On the display, they watched Sam Miller season a pot of soup. He tasted it carefully, added more salt, and smiled with satisfaction. This was the same man who had once been trained to kill enemies from distances of over a mile. He went from being a professional killer to being a cook, Vextel said in amazement. And he seems happier cooking. His psychological evaluation says he requested transfer to kitchen duty because he wanted a peaceful job, Krillinox added. He told his commanding officer that he was tired of war and wanted to feed people instead of killing them. This pattern repeated throughout the ship. The scan revealed that most of the crew had military backgrounds, but they had chosen to move into support roles. Engineers who had once built weapons now maintained life support systems. Pilots who had flown combat missions now flew supply runs. Soldiers who had stormed enemy positions now stood guard duty on peaceful patrols. They can change, Vextel realized. They can be warriors when needed, and then become something else when the fighting is over. But the most disturbing discovery came when the scan analyzed the crew's psychological profiles. Dr. Helen Carter's research showed that the capacity for violence was not unusual among humans. It was normal. Every adult human had the potential to become a deadly warrior if the situation required it. Look at this, Krillinox said, pointing to a cultural analysis file. Their society has something called the citizen-soldier concept. They believe that every person should be ready to defend their community if necessary. The scan revealed that most human governments required military service from their citizens. Young humans spent years learning how to fight, how to use weapons, and how to work as part of a military unit. Then they returned to civilian life, but they kept their training. The communications officer was a tank commander, Krillinox reported. The navigation officer was a combat pilot. The medical officer was a battlefield surgeon. Even their religious leader was a military policeman. What about the ones who were never soldiers? Vextel asked. There are very few of them, sir. And even those have basic combat training. Their schools teach children how to fight. Their sports simulate warfare. Their entertainment celebrates military virtues. The aliens watched video files from human schools. Children barely old enough to walk were learning organized games that taught teamwork, strategy, and competition. Older children studied military history and learned about famous battles. Teenagers participated in training programs that taught them basic military skills. They prepare their entire population for war, Vextel said. Not just their soldiers. Everyone. But the humans did not seem to think this was unusual. The scan found interviews with human civilians who spoke about their military training as casually as they might discuss learning to read or write. It was simply part of growing up human. We learn to fight so we can protect what we love, one human teacher explained in a video. Every citizen has a duty to defend their family, their community, and their way of life. Violence is not good, but sometimes it is necessary. The scan revealed human philosophy and ethics about warfare. Humans had spent thousands of years thinking about when it was right to fight and when it was wrong. They had developed complex rules about how wars should be fought, how prisoners should be treated, and how to protect civilians. They have moral guidelines for killing, Krillinox said in wonder. They created ethics for warfare. That makes no sense, Vextel replied. How can killing be ethical? According to their philosophy, killing is wrong unless it is done to protect innocent people. They believe that good people must sometimes do violent things to stop evil people from hurting others. This concept was alien to the Zephyrians. Their species had fought wars, but they had never developed such complex thinking about the morality of violence. To them, fighting was simply something that happened when diplomacy failed. The humans had made warfare into a moral crusade. They fight for principles, Vextel realized. Not just for territory or resources, they fight for ideas. The scan found human military codes that prove this theory. Human soldiers swore oaths to protect democracy, freedom, and human rights. They were willing to die for abstract concepts that had no physical form. This explains their willingness to sacrifice themselves, Krillanox said. They believe that some things are more important than their own lives. On the bridge of the USS Valiant, Captain Morrison was finishing his review of the patrol route. He had no idea that every word he spoke was being analyzed by alien minds trying to understand his species. "Lieutenant Parker," he said to his executive officer, "if we encounter any problems out here, remember that our job is to protect the civilian population. The colony ships passing through this sector are depending on us." "Understood, sir," Lisa Parker replied. "The crew is ready for anything." "I hope we do not have to fight," Morrison said quietly. "But if we do, we fight to win. These people deserve to live in peace." The aliens listening to this conversation were struck by the captain's attitude. He hoped to avoid violence, but he was absolutely prepared to use it if necessary. He saw warfare as a tool for protecting peace, not as an end in itself. "They are warriors who serve peace," Vextel said slowly. "They fight so that others do not have to fight." The scan was almost complete, but it had one more revelation that would shake the aliens to their core. Hidden deep in the ship's computer was a file about human expansion into space. It contained plans for colonizing hundreds of worlds, building vast fleets of starships, and spreading human civilization across the galaxy. "Commander," Krillanox said, her voice filled with awe and terror, "they plan to colonize our region of space." "Are they planning to invade us?" Vextel asked. "No, sir. Their plans assume that space is large enough for many species to coexist peacefully. They want to explore, trade, and learn from other civilizations, but what? They are prepared for the possibility that other species might be hostile. They have contingency plans for defending their colonies against alien attack." The display showed human strategic planning at its most impressive. They had considered every possible scenario for expansion into space. They had plans for peaceful coexistence, for trade relationships, for scientific cooperation, and for cultural exchange. But they also had plans for what to do if they encountered aggressive aliens who wanted to destroy them. "They hope for friendship," Vextel said, "but they prepare for war." "And, sir," Krillanox added quietly, "their expansion plans suggest they will become very powerful very quickly. Within a few centuries, they could have colonies throughout this entire sector of the galaxy." The scan finally ended, and the two aliens stood in silence on their ship's bridge. They had witnessed something unprecedented in their thousands of years of exploring space. They had found a species that combined the capacity for terrible violence, with the wisdom to use that violence only when necessary. "Terminate the scan," Vextel ordered. "We have seen enough." "Sir, should we attempt to make contact with them?" Vextel thought for a long moment, watching the human ship continue its peaceful patrol. The USS Valiant showed no signs of aggression. Its crew performed their duties with calm professionalism. They seemed like reasonable people who would welcome peaceful contact with alien visitors, but Vextel had seen what humans were capable of when threatened. He had learned about their history of warfare, their preparations for conflict, and their willingness to fight to the death for their beliefs. He had discovered a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to kill efficiently, and then had learned how to choose not to kill. "No," he said finally. "We will not make contact. Not yet." "Sir?" "These humans are not primitive savages, Krillanox. They are something far more dangerous. They are warriors who have learned wisdom. They are killers who choose to create instead of destroy. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy because they know exactly how dangerous they are." Vextel began preparing his report as the USS Valiant completed its patrol and jumped to warp speed, disappearing into the darkness of space. The humans never knew they had been watched. They never knew that alien eyes had studied their every move and found them terrifying. "What will you tell the Empire, Commander?" Krillinox asked. I will tell them the truth, Vextal replied. That we have found a species that has weaponized compassion itself.